So as we like to do, we're going to go ahead and record the session. So just know, and I appreciate everyone's flexibility on that. But we are going to have some time with our guest this evening, Danny McLean, and then we'll go after spending some time with Danny and learning a little bit more about her project and the work that she's doing. We'll get into that overview. And the other key thing that I would love for you all to be thinking about is we've been, as a city, we tend to conduct outreach and engagement with the tools that are available to us. But you all over the last 2 years have been so good about providing us with other ideas and other places and organizations and people to reach out to. And so once we've gone through the draft and you kind of have a sense of the layout and the flow, and I share with you some of the things that we are already planning for as it relates to outreach and engagement, I would like to sort of spend the last 10 or 15 or so minutes talking with you all about any additional ideas that you have. Because as we've been sharing with you over the last couple of months, when we have the draft really ready for public review, we really want to sort of hit the ground running at the beginning of the year and really be very intentional about meeting with you all, meeting with groups and organizations, and really making sure that we get the word out so that folks know that there is a document for them to sort of respond to. So we want to make sure we spend some time picking your brains, getting some ideas on places and people and organizations that we should make sure that we have on our list. And then we'll kind of wrap up with just a couple of announcements, and then we'll be on our way. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Danny. I believe she sent out a quick little snippet of herself and what she would like to talk about this evening. But Danny, if you want to just sort of take things over, I can either stop sharing, or if you have material that you would like to share, I believe you have the ability to do that as well. But we welcome you and thank you very much for reaching out to us. I've really enjoyed the conversations that I've had with you, and just really would love for you to share more with us. So I'm going to stop talking and put myself on mute, both visually and verbally, and just let you have the floor. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for having me here today, everyone. I am going to share my little PowerPoint with you. Let me get that up real quick. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Okay, let's get started then. All right, so thank you for having me today, everyone. I just really appreciate your time and the invitation to be here. So my name is Danny, as Eugene said, and I am a graduate research fellow at the Colorado Department of Transportation, otherwise known as CDOT, to keep it short. So I wanted to talk to you today about my work in the equity and transit space, but most importantly, I want to leave time, at the end of my presentation to hear from you about the issues my project is really trying to dive into. So before we start, let me just introduce myself so I'm not a total stranger. I also do want to provide a trigger warning because I am going to touch on, sexual harassment and assault in this presentation. So, please feel free to do what you need to take care of yourself in this regard. So about me, I've lived in Colorado since 2006, which is a little over half my life now. That's in various places, right? So Denver, Windsor, Louisville, and I currently live in Lakewood. So I've been exposed to a lot of our various, Colorado communities. I've worked for years across sectors in what I like to call the people planet space. So much of my work experience is quite random. It's very random, actually. But what unites all of my, past roles and experiences is trying to make a positive impact on our environment and in people's lives, right? So I co-founded a zero waste grocery delivery service, but I also worked at a food bank as well as the National Renewable Energy Lab. So really all over the place. But this background led me to get my master's of the environment from CU Boulder, which I graduated from in May of this year. And since then, I started this fellowship at CDOT, and here I am speaking to you today. That's my life in a nutshell. So what am I trying to achieve? Basically, my research project is seeking to understand how to make, buses, trains, and other forms of transit in Colorado work better for all people, regardless of their gender or sex, by applying a gender equitable lens. So specifically, I'm looking to hear about women's and LGBTQ folks' experiences, their needs, their concerns in using public transportation, so that I can provide, really actionable recommendations to make it better for these populations. So the big question that you may be asking is why, right? Why is it a concern of transit to intentionally take into account women's and non-binary folks' needs? Number one, women constitute the majority of transit riders nationwide. So it seems like it would be important to design a system with their needs in mind, right? But recent studies are very, very clear that women and LGBTQ folks both face a lot more challenges in using public transit, and that their transportation needs really aren't being met by transit. So there are various needs for that. The first being that when you think about it, all our major global cities today have been planned by and designed for men. And that's just simply because women were absent from these professions until very recently in the span of human history. Because of this, city infrastructure has really used kind of the able-bodied man as the prototype user. And not everyone has that body. Not everyone plays that social role, right? So it may not take into account different needs. A good example of this is just the lack of diverse amenities at bus and light rail stops, right? Restrooms are a great example. So restrooms are really important for caregiving purposes, and caregiving, still to this day, largely is on women's shoulders. And physiologically, women have to use the restroom more frequently. It's just kind of how it is. And then ramps are another great example. So for wheelchairs, people who need physical assistance, and strollers for children. Secondly, and this is probably not a surprise to most people, but sexual assault and harassment are very prevalent in public transit, but it is not often reported, okay? So, harassment, just so we're clear, is any non-consensual, unwanted attention that has kind of a sexual gendered dimension. So catcalling, whistling, unwanted, nasty looks, gestures, groping, pulling on hair, things of this nature. So harassment usually hovers around 50% of women having experienced it in a transit environment across countries. But some say that that's a really low estimate. And some studies show it can go up as high as 75% in some areas of the US. And one study in Paris put it at 100% of women in the study had experienced sexual harassment in transit. And then a recent study, though we don't have a lot of data on this, points to 3/4 of LGBTQ folks had been harassed in a transit environment. This became super prevalent in the Me Too movement that reached its peak several years ago. Lots of the instances of groping, stalking, staring, all of that happened in a bus or a train. And I would just add, from a personal perspective too, I don't have a car. I'm fully transit reliant, and I would say that I experience harassment in the Denver transit system about twice a week, if not more than that. And it definitely does not make me feel safe or welcome or like I belong there in any regard. So it's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily talk about, but experience on a very frequent basis. So worryingly, studies are showing that this lack of infrastructure and functionality in transit, as well as these safety concerns, are impacting how women and LGBTQ folks are even using transit, right? And these are things, again, that a lot of people can relate to. So for example, women will often opt for a Lyft or an Uber and pay more, right, a pink tax, pay more for using that private transportation than using less costly public transit out of fear for their safety, right? Women carry keys, pepper spray, other things to protect themselves or feel safe when they use transit. or they'll just stop using transit at night. And then, like I said, they stop using transit. So some studies put half of women, or almost half of women, have reduced their transit usage because of past experiences with harassment in a transit environment, which is very alarming when we want more people using public transit, right? The issue is that Colorado really hasn't focused on this a whole lot, if at all. We don't have data on these issues. We don't have necessarily a gendered focus on transportation. And I'm really hoping to be able to change that with this project. So my core questions are, number one, gather that baseline understanding. How are women and LGBTQ folks experiencing public transit? What's it like? What are the problems? What aren't the problems? And then after that, how can we make it better? So this is CDOT, local governments, transit agencies. How can we improve systems with women and LGBTQ folks in mind? Okay. And then finally, like broad, big picture is how can CDOT kind of apply more of a gender equity lens to other forms of transportation, like biking, for example. So, in sum, my project really argues that gender inclusion is vital to making Colorado's public transit better. And at the end of the day, everyone deserves equal access to public transit and the ability to get to where they need to go safely and efficiently. It's a question of equal access in addition to like a healthy environment, right? Because like I said, we want people out of vehicles and using transit more as a key way to reduce air pollution. So to wrap it up, my research is going to go through April of next year. And part of that research is to hear directly from folks like you about your needs and concerns in transit. So at this point, I'd really love to open the floor now to discuss. If you prefer talking with me about your perspective privately or telling your stories about transit privately, because there could be some sensitive things in there, we can set up a separate time to chat. So here's my contact info, my email, phone number. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you so desire. I just want to stress that all input is super valuable in this project, and personal stories are particularly valuable because they help, paint that picture and reinforce why action is needed on these issues. So with that, I welcome everyone to speak up and tell me, what came to your minds during this presentation? Like, what are the challenges that you, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, what have you, what is or isn't working for you in public transit?
All right, Jaime and Elizabeth, I see your hands. So I don't want to fall into stereotypes or anything like that, but I was going to let Elizabeth go first, Jaime, if that's all right. And Elizabeth, feel free to, yeah, there you go. Thank you.
I'm excited about this research. Thanks so much for sharing what you're up to. It's really critical and important. And I appreciate that you named gender, but I also see different forms of bodies, ableism, and the BIPOC focus. And I just wanted to name a question and a tension that I've been grappling with. A few of you in this space have heard my family's challenges with transportation, public transportation in the pandemic time where there aren't as many eyes on the train and open freebasing in the train cars and physical violence that my family has experienced. And then there's this tension around and working in other neighborhoods and listening to people about why they, particularly families and mothers, talking about why they are so glad that they're not taking public transportation anymore. It was all around these safety threats. And then there's this tension around I don't want to see the solution to safety being over policing. And that's not something that makes people feel safe either. And so I'm curious how the research may be engaging those sorts of tensions around, since a lot of these are threats some that are substantiated, some that are just creepy people making, but to tease out some of the ways that we could make things safer, but understand how different, demographic experiences shape the experience of transportation in that way too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So just a quick question before I respond to that. Do you all still see my screen shared right now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, let me see what's going on. So I accidentally got kicked out of the meeting, and now I'm back, and now the screen is very, very strange. Eugene, can you control that on your end and just make me stop sharing? Because I don't have the option to anymore.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Why don't you go ahead and take Elizabeth's question, and I'll be happy to.
Absolutely. Okay.
And go to Jaime, and I think I see another hand that's up after that. So thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for your point of view, Elizabeth. I really appreciate it. I think for me, there's a lot of different aspects in what you had to say. So number one, my research is going to very intentionally take an intersectional approach. So looking at the differences and not making broad generalizations about different groups, right? Because we know that women's experiences, who are also people of color, have vastly different, experiences using public transit than a white woman like myself, for example. So I will be seeing the best ways that I can apply that intersectional lens to my work. In terms of policing specifically, again, this is a pretty emerging area of study, I will say, but particularly with conversations around George Floyd that happened in the past few years, there is this kind of new literature that's leaning towards how do we community safety? How do we approach community safety without the presence of armed police, right? And so that's certainly going to be included and explored in my research as well. I can't give you an exact answer on what that looks like just because I haven't gotten there yet, but it's certainly something that I have in mind as I proceed. I hope I touched on everything that you said, but let me know if not.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for both Elizabeth, the question, and Danny, your response. I see Jaime, and then we'll go to Maggie.
Hi, everyone. Elizabeth, thank you for sharing your story, because, it's I don't think about that as a really big, I can look roguish person, because it doesn't, thank you for sharing your perspective, because I don't see that, from my 6'2" self point of view on transit. And then thank you for your question, because, we have talked about this, our challenges of using transit, but to have this perspective, has me ask a couple of questions, like what do we think about as we're trying to help propose a design of our neighborhoods where we're in a very dangerous area. A lot of our transit and our byways and highways, for that matter, all are in valleys and rivers and creeks, and it's I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it nicely, but it's just scary to you're vulnerable there, no matter who you are, and we're designing this, and a lot of our neighborhoods have these, and I've even talked about our bicycle ways, why aren't we going through the creeks? And then, for you to kind of touch on a lot of things, it's actually be kind of dangerous to go through use these creek greenways, right now at 6 o'clock, right? I mean, come on, it's dark. But anyway, I just want to think about how do we think about that, looking at these plans that we're about to see here in a little bit, because I'm glad you can present the problem, but for somebody who likes to kind of play chess, I have no clue how to think about solving this, or even, include this in our plans, because our plan is not very specific to these type of issues and equity. It's really hard, and it's really hard for us to even have the conversation sometimes. So thank you.
Danny, any thoughts? Or I know one of the things that we've been trying to do, sorry, let me turn my camera on. I know one of the things, and Val, you can certainly speak to this better than I can, since you spearheaded our quality of life section, but really thinking a lot about safety and security, and working with our partners in Parks and Rec to help emphasize why lighting, for example, along the gulch and the trail is so important. We sometimes, this is not a comment, if you will, on our partners, but there's always the financial aspect, there's the maintenance aspect that is where sometimes people want to go when we are trying to make really strong recommendations that do have cost implications. But there is no price that anyone can put on a person's safety. And I think it's on us, both the planning team within CPD, and those that have been working with you for the last 2 years, as well as you all and our elected officials, to really say, okay, we hear you, and we need to address these issues. And I know the lighting in and of itself may not be the solution. It will be multiple needs, but that's what we are hoping to do with the plan, is to point out what the community feels are places to start and investments to make. And then it's on us to try to then encourage our agency partners to go after the resources, or to think about developing solutions that might be a little bit creative and a little bit out of the box, so that we can address these issues. And I'll stop with that. Danny, anything you want to add to Jaime's comments? And then we'll turn it over to Maggie.
I would just say thank you for the comment. I think part of the solution to this is including the right people, and the right people are, the ones that live in the community, as well as those who represent, different parts of the population, right? So women, men, everyone in between. And I think that's exactly what Eugene is doing here, right? Is just having all of you folks here to have your voice, in how these plans are developed. And I'd say too that in terms of infrastructure, I think Eugene brings up a really good point. It's also about collaborating across departments, city departments, in a way that hasn't historically been done, right? So lighting, policing, even like the tree, like the forestry department, all of these things are important in creating a sense of safety. And so it's bringing players together across those departments all in the same room, which takes a lot more time, right? It takes a lot more effort to do that kind of collaboration, but in the end, I think is what we need.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Maggie.
Hey, I just wanted to make a couple of quick points. I'm Maggie. I work for Councilman Clark, but I also am primarily a bicyclist, but I do take a lot of transit, not as much during COVID, but try to stay out of the single occupancy vehicle when possible. And a couple of things I wanted to point out is, one, I think transit and bicycling have sort of a similar problem in that we don't have enough people using the facilities in certain times and days to make it safe for everyone. I used to live in Washington, D.C., and at 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday at my train station, there were hundreds of people around, and there were people on the streets. And sort of like Jaime was saying a second ago, if I was biking on the South Platte River Trail right now, I'd probably be the only person that I would see for quite some ways, and that could be spooky. So, and I'm like Jaime, I'm not a shrinking violet or a tiny daisy, but I also have experienced, some scary stuff out there. Actually, more scary stuff on transit than on my bike, because at least on my bike I can zip away. But the one just quick anecdotal story I wanted to tell was having to do with the Broadway station area plan when I was involved in that process. So that's the former Gates site. And how that connects over to the west part of District 7. And one of the things that a group of people kept pushing for was an elevated bicycle way that went over a bunch of the barriers that we have, I-25, Platte River, all those kinds of things. And I had to point out at one point in time that I feel a lot safer with a very well managed at-grade crossing that's lit and that there's cars parked next to me or stopped next to me or people around than I do on a big flyover like that, when I might be the only other person and suddenly there's someone coming the other way. And, as I like to say, there's only one way off this island and you're kind of in a tricky spot. So I think from I think sometimes we like to get really excited about big, exciting, and in that case, really expensive projects. And in reality, sometimes doing a better job of integrating those modes, and maybe it's making the transit stop in a busier place. Maybe it's connecting the transit stop to the rec center lobby or the the well-lit part of the park. Maybe it's moving it half a block so that it's near the well-lit part of the park or something like that. Is what I would just want to remind everyone is as a possibility when sometimes we simplify things a little bit. So anyway, that's just a thing I wanted to point out. And I did take the detour of the South Platte River Trail through West Denver a couple of days ago, and it is 0% marked, FYI. So unless you know West Denver really well, you cannot find your way from downtown to Valverde. But it did in many places feel better to be on the street than I would have felt when I was on the trail. So Jaime makes a really good point of that isolation and being down by the water and that kind of stuff, especially with some of the unfortunate circumstances that we have in Denver these days. It can be a little tricky. So anyway, I will shut up. I could talk about this for days. Danny, I'll send you an email later and we'll chat too. So, but thanks for doing this work. I think that it's super important, and getting people and women and kids feeling more comfortable doing this kind of stuff is a huge chunk of the population and a huge step towards some of these goals we're trying to reach.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for your thoughts. Danny, any response to that? And I see Sean is next, I believe.
Sure. Yeah, I can pipe in a little bit there. I think the critical mass piece is so important, right? There's a lot of recommendations as to moving stops like outside of a restaurant or so on and so forth. So you have eyes on the street, that kind of idea. So it's not only a question of like providing the bare necessities for making public transit work, but it's like, how do you make it actually attractive for people to use to build that critical mass, right? In terms of the convenience and functionality, but the aesthetic, is it comfortable? Things of that nature also need to be thought through. And then per your comment about paths, lighting, and all of that, I think one of the issues that, I see from a state government perspective is that the people designing, transit systems aren't necessarily the ones who are using transit systems. So like really getting that perspective via, walking audits or stuff of that nature from people, from actual users and bike riders and so on is super crucial. So I also want to respond to Naomi's question in the chat. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get there. Has your research unveiled any insights into the perception of danger versus the actual risk of danger in transit? Yes. So not necessarily my research per se, but I've unearthed a lot of research on perception versus actual risk. So that is a field of knowledge that is quite well developed at this point. I would say that I think for me, the difference is, how can I say this? There's not much of a difference between the two because they're both, I think, going to discourage folks from using public transit, right? So as long as there's a perception, even if the safety risk isn't per se real, people are not going to use transit in the same way as if there actually were that danger. But it is fascinating. And if you want to pop me your email, I can send you some studies on that if you're interested.
Thank you so much, Danny. This is so fascinating. So I'm really interested in this. And I was also thinking about that from the perspective of, more privileged and generally white communities pushing back against transit options in their communities, especially like light rail stations, out of, claims that it will bring violence or crime or something to neighborhoods. So it's just so interesting. And I'm definitely going to put my email in the chat. Thank you.
All right, Sean, I would love to get your voice in this conversation, and then Jean will come to you next.
Yeah, to follow up, you kind of stole my thunder, Danny, but I was thinking about your idea of putting like restaurants and shops at transit stops, and the light rail, those are pretty fixed stops, I would assume. Those will probably be the same hopefully for the next 20, 50 years, whereas bus stops move around a bit here and there, so probably not as useful. but those train stops, I mean, all the way along the W line, each of those stops would be a great place to have eyes on the stop, and maybe eyes on the stop at Union Station and the stops along the way. And then in terms of Maggie's comment about being on the Platte and feeling like you're by yourself, well, along the Platte, there's a lot of homeless people along there. So you're not quite alone, but maybe some bad elements. So maybe it's even worse than being alone.
Thank you for that, Sean. I know I keep coming back to you, Dana, to see if you have any thoughts or reactions. Not that you have to for every comment, but if not, then we'll go to Jean. All right, Jean, you're up.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for this. And as you can tell, this is kind of a universal issue for everyone, not just one specific segment of the female population. And I say that because historically, Sun Valley is a neighborhood of women, single women with children. That's changing a bit, I think, as we start to introduce more mixed income and diverse income kinds of units and market rate. But certainly we'll have probably one of the largest percentages of affordable housing of any neighborhood in the city in the future, as it's being built out. And we have the Decatur Federal Station Area Plan, which is very well lit. Everybody can sit and look at it and see what's going on, but you can't do anything to get there. And right now we have people coming back into the neighborhood. We just had a meeting on safety and crime, and I think your questions and concerns around perceived versus actual are very much there. But for women, that is very much an issue. And literally, Sun Valley closes up at night and no one goes out after dark. I mean, people say they are afraid to be in the neighborhood after dark, and that's even men. So, we do have visitors coming in with tents and all of that. We have the Solution Center. So whether it's all accurate, although we have certainly seen an uptick, everyone has, but it's very much there. And I don't see in our design any activation that's planned or even possible around that light rail station. I really like CDOT. I'm glad they're in the neighborhood. They have been welcome. They're wonderful neighbors. But we built CDOT right across the light rail station on the only parcel that could have had development with eyes, in close proximity to that. And, they go home at 6 o'clock. I mean, right now they're not even fully staffed there, but by 6 o'clock, that place is completely empty. So there's nothing there. Everything I've heard from the stadium development is that their, parking area along the streetscape will never be, like infill development, and so I feel like we're really stuck, because to traverse, and then go past this kind of open green space and over, over the gulch and all of that is a really scary proposition. And, I frankly watch a few of the women that are doing it, and I can just, I can see how nervous they are. And they've told me. And I think that, for a lot of our women that do rely on public transportation for jobs, that unfortunately are outside the neighborhood, that it's going to be a continuing concern. And I'm not sure how much density it'll take, before it really feels like that's an active, bustling kind of place where you're just, kind of protected, because of others in proximity. It really is a concern.
Thank you for that, Jean. I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing as well. I think I would hearing you speak reminds me of someone who has become very popular recently in the kind of Denver pedestrian space, who is Jonathan Stalls. And he's kind of a TikTok guy. He's using TikTok to raise awareness about the lack of pedestrian infrastructure and transit infrastructure for those who walk, bike, and roll in wheelchairs. And one of his critiques was the area around CDOT and how, you know, CDOT's this great, beautiful building, but then right next to it is horrifically unsafe pedestrian infrastructure. So I totally hear you, and I share in your frustration.
Well, that was something that we were really hoping could be addressed somewhat in this plan. And I haven't really looked at how the draft has come out, but I hope that it's not so high level that it can just kind of continue to malinger. And, you know, like any plan, you know, it gets cherry picked as to what actually gets developed. Should you choose to develop that particular item, then there are guidelines, but it could be ignored for years. And it doesn't prevent other things necessarily from being developed. So, you know, I think that it continues and it will continue to be a concern. And, you know, certainly there's a lot of other things than just CDOT that's contributing to that. But I think when we put it in, we actually talked about that space being a more active use. And so it was kind of surprising to everyone when we found out that, you know, it was going for, a CDOT administrative building. And we really didn't have any part, you know, or influence in that. I don't even know how the decision was made. I mean, the stadium district said they had to sell it and they would never sell anything else, but they had to sell it to CDOT. So, you know, whatever, you know, that took to that. But now we're left kind of with what we had thought would be at least a solution. You know, a safety solution is no longer available to us.
Thank you for that, Jean. We're going to show a little bit of, you know, some sample of the plan, and I wanted to really use the land use section for tonight's review because I think we are trying to address some of these issues, particularly around transit, based off of the feedback that you all have given us. So we'll get to that here in a second. But Heidi, I know that you are a biker and pedestrian advocate, and I wanted to make sure if you had anything you wanted to add to this conversation as well.
Who?
You.
Me? Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been commented on, and it is highly dangerous down in that area. And Jean's points were, I mean, everybody, you know, it is extremely dangerous, and I don't know how we can solve some of those things, and especially in a major spot. And I think that yeah, getting more eyes and more people and being able to better lighting. I mean, we've had problems down under there, under the overpass, the Federal, going under just to the station, and the things that we see. It's just, yeah, I 100% agree with everything that everyone's saying, and it should be. I really support having more of that language in our plan and making sure that we address all of those things. And safety is huge. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much for that, Heidi. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, but wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to chime in. I'm keeping my eye on the clock, and I just wanted to see if there were any last minute or any additional comments. Jean, I don't know if you have a new one or if that's your hand from before. And Danny,
Sorry.
you're welcome to stick around if you are able, just to kind of get a sense of what the plan is saying around the transit facilities, particularly the West Rail Line. But just a last 30 seconds, anyone else have anything they want to share?
I just was starting to type it, but I think some of what we've just been talking about, the responses, I don't know if you're developing a survey or if it's primarily qualitative conversations and focus groups, but I think the experience, it's unfortunate that the W line is situated where it was easiest to put it in a way that is away from all eyes. And it is hard to develop that and have the riparian corridor protected. And so our experiences of safety can't be separated from the particular design there. And so it may be important to have some way to capture the places and to see how people have different experiences when design intentionally places transit along areas where there is natural already usual activity. But it's really going to be it's difficult to design that into a space that is designed not to have that.
Absolutely, I hear you.
So, Danny, again, thank you so much for reaching out, offering to come and talk with this group. As you can tell, there's a lot of great ideas and some real issues that community members in the west side of Denver face with our transit and mobility facilities. So we definitely look forward to seeing how your work can influence decision making. Whether it be CDOT or with the other transit agencies and providers. I would love to see an opportunity where funding decisions around investments that come from CDOT can go towards solutions. So we'll be rooting for you in the background that you can help influence those decision makers and those projects at the state level.
Well, thank you again for having me. All of your feedback has been so wonderful. So I'm going to pop my email again into the chat just so you have it. If you have personal stories, more suggestions, just want to set up another half hour to just discuss one-on-one with me, I would love that. So thanks again to everyone. I just so appreciate you.
Awesome, thanks. All right, well, we're going to keep going here. I'm going to keep my eye on the clock there. But yeah, feel free to jump right on in. Or continue dialogue in the chat. So one thing I wanted to do is really kind of spend a few minutes going over the outline of how the draft is coming together, and then review with you the sample that I sent earlier. So that is just one component of the overall plan. But this is the document outline so that when you guys get it, which we're hoping to get it to you during December, so it could be during our winter break, that you will have some familiarity with the structure of it. So we always open our plans with sort of an acknowledgement, people who were involved. So you all are, of course, we are wanting to recognize the hard work and dedication that you've provided to this process. And we'll do so in the acknowledgements. Of course, there will be a table of contents. Our first chapter, the introduction chapter, really gets into some of the details and the setup, if you will, for the plan, and I'll get into that in a second. Then our chapter 2 is really where I call it the meat of the plan. So much like the sample that I sent to you earlier, the land use and built form, economy and housing, mobility, and then quality of life. And quality of life is a really big substantive component to the plan, given all the hard work that Valerie and the team have put into it. Everyone has contributed. Valerie really spearheaded and led all the coordination efforts with the different agencies. Sung is our content and graphics master, and Becca is the person that is like making sure that we are speaking with a united voice and has really been adding a view and a lens to the work that we wouldn't have without her. So I feel so fortunate to have such a great team that are all working on behalf of each of you. So just wanted to do that quick shout out. Then we get into chapter 3, which is where we get into specific information related to the individual neighborhoods. So one of the things I wanted to make sure to just stress, although it's here on the screen, The chapter 2 areas where we really talk about recommendations that apply to across all 6 neighborhoods. And so if it's something that's an overarching recommendation, you may not necessarily see it repeated in the neighborhood chapter unless there's something unique or specific to that neighborhood related to a larger area-wide recommendation. And then we struggled with the word transformative, even based off of some of the input that you all gave us. Long story short, we're currently sort of sticking with that language for the moment, but we do have some opportunities to look at some bigger projects that we believe can help address some of those significant issues, and they sort of require their own section, so that would be chapter 4. And then the last chapter really gets into how do we make this all happen? What are the steps? What's the sequencing? Who are the partners that will be involved? I think I saw Zach on the call earlier, another key partner in this process who's been with us from the start and continues to be with us. So Zach, thank you so much for representing Dottie through this process. And hopefully you got some information related to the work that Danny's doing, and maybe the two of you could also meet offline because I know you've been doing a lot in this space as well. So I'm not going to take a lot of time on this, but just to kind of give you a sense of how we set up the plan, because it's really specific to some of the feedback that you all have given us. So we give a general area overview to help orient people who aren't familiar with the West area. So we do the physical components, we talk about demographics, some of the employment statistics, population, etc. And then we talk about how to use the plan. This plan is for the community first and foremost, but it's also a tool for other city agencies. So if a resident feels they need to rezone a property, we kind of give some guidance on how this plan can be used in that process. We will have an executive summary once I get around to writing it. And the third bullet here, which I really wanted to make sure we pointed out tonight, was really around planning for equity and inclusion. We've heard a lot about that from this community, and I really wanted to make sure that you all knew that at the very beginning, we set up sort of a lens of equity and inclusion that we hope sort of permeates through the rest of the plan, and is that sort of early idea on these are the key issues that were important to this community and to those involved in this planning effort, and to keep these things in mind as you're going through the plan. So we've talked about this plenty of times, and that is sort of the foundation set by the citywide Blueprint Denver, the guiding principles and values that you all have taken even further. And this is where we talk about access to opportunity, really reducing the threats of gentrification and displacement, and then really the needs around housing and jobs. We talk about complete community, so that we are making sure that all of the city's efforts come together to really truly make all of our city communities whole. And then some of the challenges that are specific to West, the environmental challenges, some of the land use decisions that are a holdover that we are all working to address. I'm thinking particularly, the impervious surfaces, those hard surfaces along the South Platte River that are pretty dominant in the Val Verde and Sun Valley neighborhoods, just as an example. I already kind of touched on this, but our chapter 2 is again where those area-wide recommendations are, and those of course are the 4 topics that we cover in that section. And then our sample, the land use and built form. And so you can even see within that sort of category, there are subsections. And so we try to get into the contents even further. So let me just take a quick second here. So I wanted to pull up the PDF that I sent to you all earlier today, just as a quick walk through. Here we go. So I'm not going to go through this in the individual details because you all have a copy of this. Let me start at the beginning. That might be helpful. So again, we've got the sort of structure, how you can go through it, the introduction that really tries to set up the vision as you all have cast it of what the community would be like in 2040, so a future forward-looking situation. Let's see here, keep going. We talk about neighborhood context, which is really coming out of Blueprint Denver. We've got those things mapped, so we want to convey to you all how the city looks at those different contexts and then how they play into the recommendations that get made. We've got future places, again, which is all coming out of Blueprint Denver, to really help try to describe and explain how the city views these neighborhood contexts and what we imagine are in them that help sort of set up the framework for the recommendations that get made. We've shared this map with, I think, you all before as we've gone through and talked about land use previously. But this is an example of where we are suggesting that there be a concentration of any future development that takes place around our transit facilities. So you can see them sort of concentrated around the Decatur Federal Station. Decatur Federal kind of comes together with Federal Boulevard, you know, the rail station, and then the state highway itself. And so with all of the planning that's already sort of been done and discussed in that area, that's a pretty significant location within the West Plan, where we do hope, to Jean's point, that we can direct and channel development and growth primarily because of the needs of that area to help bring the life and vibrancy to that area, and also leverage the investments that we've all made in the transit facilities. And so you can see that playing out along West Colfax, you can see that playing out along Knox Station, Perry Station, and then again around Sheridan Station. Sheridan being another sort of regional transit station within the RTD system. And then we kind of go into some more details around how these locations can play out. So again, you all have a copy of this. It's not necessarily meant for you to go through with a fine-tooth comb, because we are going to give you another version, a more complete version of the plan, where we would be asking you to kind of tell us or weigh in on it. But I don't anticipate there being a lot of change from this draft. So you know, you can kind of get a sense for how it's structured. Again, this is another sort of opportunity map that speaks to areas of growth that really we continue to advance and continue to hold on to a statement that came from the community, and that is directing future growth and development to places that can handle it. That phrase resonates and continues to resonate in my mind, and I keep hearing it over and over again. And this is how we have translated your input and feedback into potential development and associated heights. Now, we all heard, for those who were able to attend last month, how the city, through Annalise Hoke, the principal planner that presented last month, how we're looking to leverage any development that goes, you know, that's in a 3-story or more district, how the city is looking to make sure or ensure that there's affordability built in to any project, whether one requires rezoning or not. So we are developing tools to really leverage any development that takes place in 3 stories or more, and make sure that we get affordable housing out of that. What we are hoping to do is look for opportunities to take that even further, so that if there is a rezoning required by a person proposing a project, that we can engage them. You all can look to this plan to engage that potential project or potential developer for even more affordability or more community benefits based off of the conversations that we've had earlier this summer. So these are ways that this plan can be used to really get at the needs and the desires of the community. Very quickly, I do want to point out on this particular map or this particular page, we also heard that Blueprint Denver in and of itself felt as if it was perhaps reaching too far in a too general of a way along the west rail line corridor. So this is an example of where, based off of what we believe we heard from you all, we calibrated even further sort of the future potential around development to make sure that the intensity was really truly focused at 1/8 of a mile around the station, but the spaces in between kind of get calibrated down from what Blueprint Denver would suggest, so that it is in better keeping with the nature and fabric of the existing community. So really, this kind of walks through these 3 images here, really sort of are meant to demonstrate how we listened to you and calibrated this sort of topic area based off of the feedback that we heard. So in the middle, those places that are sort of outlined in blue are where we actually brought down the development intensity so that any new development that occurs is in keeping with its surrounding context. So that's just an example. So again, well, just quickly pause here. You can sort of see the structure. The L4 is actually the 4th recommendation. So we talk about a policy, really what the intent is, where we have background information. We really want to speak to that background information, and then how that background information in the policy informs the strategies that we think can be leveraged in order to reach the desired outcome as we believe we've heard it. And you'll see that sort of play out through the document, sort of that approach. So we have, housing, our landmark preservation, our historic preservation, adaptive reuse. We've got a lot of these elements in here. This really gets to looking at opportunities to introduce additional housing types, so ADUs, for example. We've got the missing middle in conversation, where there's opportunities to introduce or to continue to support what we used to do, like around the garden court or courtyard style development that's not really big, but still can accommodate more people living in the community without significant change to the nature and fabric of the existing neighborhoods. So we're trying to point out places that we believe we've heard you all say to us are good examples, and that would be nice to have more of, with that also sort of speaks to affordability and attainability. So again, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but just to kind of give you a sense of the layout and the structure, because each of the topic areas sort of follow this overall framework and approach. So I'll stop sharing this because, again, you guys have copies of this that you can take a look at. And as you have questions or other things come to mind, of course, reach out to any one of us in the team, and we'd be happy to meet with you and talk through anything in more specific detail. Now, if I can get back to the presentation, I'll try to wrap things up here. We're getting pretty close because I really do want to make sure that we get to, let's see here. Oh, you'd think after almost 2 years of doing this. I'm going to start at the beginning. Anyway, I'm about to, if this will work for me, get into the public review process for the draft.
Eugene, while you're we've got a couple of kudos in the chat I just want to share with you if you haven't seen. Thanks for showing how Blueprint overreaches and how the maximums are lower than that. Danny says, what an awesome plan. You all have put a ton of work into this. Elizabeth says, congratulations, this has developed really far. Quick request, could you ultimately label the photos in the plan for where or what they are? That's a Eugene call.
I will definitely take that comment, and I'm sure we can do that. And I'll just get with the team and we'll figure out a way forward on that. But the vast majority of our photos were taken by one of the 4 of us or provided by you all when you guys have been providing us with input. So we really worked hard to make sure that we had local examples that were coming from the West, because this is y'all.
I appreciated and recognize them, and it's a way to lift up that you have, given that we have 6 very diverse and different neighborhoods. And since you took that effort to have representation across, and I recognize sites from most of the neighborhoods because I am in all of them, but I think it would add to the richness and honor how much you did to be able to, if it's easy to do that, like having at least a neighborhood name on it, and if it's a particular landmark or something, it would just have those pictures, not like show, like someone looking at it 10 years from now could just think they were stock photos or something, but you did the real work, and it can tell the story of the place for readers in a more in-depth way.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth, and we thank you for your comments. So that's pretty. I won't speak for everyone on the team, but I think that's a pretty easy thing we can do. So again, I want to get to the next slide, which is getting your feedback on engagement. But these are the things that we have been doing through this West process. Because we don't know exactly how COVID is, what it's going to do as we get into the colder winter months and more of us are spending time indoors. At the moment, we are planning on our public launch for the draft to be virtual. Now, having said that, each of the council offices have been extremely generous in offering their support, their staff, their resources, Facebook Live events and things like that to help push and get the word out. And so we are developing a process, a sort of a strategy. I think some of you may remember meeting Mike Ramsey, and we've been working with him and our communications team to develop sort of a strategic approach so that when we are ready to release it, we're all set with everything, just push the button and go. And so we really want to do it and have a really robust public release, even if it has to be virtual. We will continue to use the online sort of approach and portal, recognizing its limitations, but it is a good way for us to get information for those who have the way to get it to us through their timing and their needs. And we definitely want to come and speak to each of the registered neighborhood organizations and any other community organizations that will have us. And when I say this, I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right time frame. We're really wanting to do a hard push sort of in that latter half of January and really the entire month of February. So if you haven't seen us 4 or 5 times in January and February, then you know that we need your help to do a little bit more. We want to, of course, go back to groups and organizations that we've already met with and give them updates and kind of keep them apprised of the progress that this group has made. We'll do office hours as well. But I did want to just open the floor and ask you all for any additional thoughts, ideas, suggestions. I know that over the last few months, you all have organized your own meetings. And so would love to know what kind of tools or resources, materials that we can produce to help you have your own conversations, even if they don't include us, which is completely, totally fine. We have talked about producing some printed material. Of course, we'll print out copies of the plan and make sure that those are made available to you. I think we've heard about having locations like perhaps in our rec centers or at libraries where people can come in, and at their leisure look through and provide comments that way. So I'm going to stop talking and just see if anyone, hopefully you all are giving us all your ideas in the chat so we can capture them there. But if there are any other ideas that anyone would like to share.
I'd like to say something. I can't see the chat. I had to move to my phone. It actually takes a lot of bandwidth if I'm sharing. The event last night that I went to, I think that if you can have more of these, I don't think you have to give away $25 gift cards, but if you can have some sort of actual engagement for members, for people, for the public, if you are going to be able to go to the rec centers, because we're starting to gather again, although the pandemic's kind of spiking, but we are, I mean, people are gathering more. We haven't quite tapped into that as a neighborhood association. I wouldn't know where we would have something like what I saw last night, which is amazing at Sun Valley Kitchen, and then how it was paired to have people kind of be incentivized to give input. So I mean, if you guys can keep that in mind for us, I mean, like we can't make all those cool posters. I mean, I don't know. I hope Valerie can share like kind of more stuff with you guys on how that was coordinated and who did it, because I really missed out. I mean, I had to work, but I really wanted to check this out, and it seemed like a very successful approach to it that may work for us. But again, it's that incentivization, you know, and that actual engagement, not just saying we went to your meeting, we had community engagement. You know, I don't think that's how like stuff operates around here. Thank you.
You bet, and I agree with you. I'm not interested in checking a box, which I know the city gets, that there's a perception that that's often what we do, and there are people that's what they do. But this team we are invested in this community, and we absolutely want to do it the right way. So thank you for that, Jaime. And Valerie, I know you were there last night. Anything you want to add, or any additional detail?
Yeah, sure. Just really quickly, it was a great turnout in my opinion. I know that they did have like 100+ RSVPs, but it was really chilly last night, so they only had about up to 50 people show up. However, that crowd was a very diverse crowd that we were able to engage with. We gave out the free $25 King Super gift cards, as well as like chocolates, and got a chance to ask each community member, you know, what they wanted to share about their neighborhood, whether it was about transit, housing, food, parks. We got a lot of feedback, and there were mainly residents and community members from Sun Valley, but we also had some folks from Westwood, as well as Villa Park and Athmar Park. I know that the entire event, I was just a volunteer for the evening, and I got to sit with Councilwoman Torres's table to give out the last portion of the kind of walkthrough that they had set up. But I know that Colorado Jobs with Justice was the main organization that pulled everything together and did most of the legwork, and it was in partnership with Council District 3, as well as Community Planning and Development, our department. So if you all have any other questions or anything like that, I have the contacts from COJWJ, and happy to share those.
Yeah, and I just want to give a quick plug. Thank you so much, Valerie, for attending that event on our behalf last night. And that relationship, there's a particular council person who made sure to make that connection for us. So again, a demonstration of the support that this process and that all of you are getting from all of your council members, but last night's event in particular, Council District 3. So we really thank Councilwoman Torres and her staff for their support in this effort. And we can certainly continue our partnership with Colorado Jobs with Justice to do more of that. It's definitely our intention. Anyone else want to share? I know we're getting close to the end here, but really just want to open the opportunity that you all tell us, and if it's not right now, or if you have, you know, I'm sure you guys are putting things in the chat, and I can't see that and do this at the same time and do a halfway decent job. So if you have ideas, just share those with us in the chat, and we'll capture those. But anyone want to share one more thing? And Jean, I don't know if you were at last night's event, or if you have any thoughts on or reflections on it.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm in isolation. So we had some COVID occurring from a large meeting we had a week ago. And so, but I did want to just share that, you know, we developed a model, and I think we were very successful, that we used it with our NEST grant last year, and we did it in collaboration with other NEST identified neighborhoods of Val Verde and Villa Park. And West Colfax, because we could kind of, you know, work with those at this time, and we wanted to kind of roll out that model. So we worked through the RNOs, and they helped promote it, and then we used kind of a promotora model. And we did it like down and dirty, where we did it all by Zoom. And it just built on its own. And we, probably within a 5-day period, and we did use the gift cards, don't get me wrong, they were there. We had surveys and everything built into it. We had discussion, we had lots of room. Some of the people I think that are on this even participated in those, as residents, just to kind of see how we did it. It was all developed by the residents themselves. So it was peer-to-peer kind of leadership. And, we got a really good turnout, in 5 days, and a good response. And people actually hung around after, the mandatory time, they hang around for another half an hour, wanting to know more and all of that. So I think there is a way to do it even virtually. And you can kind of use a pro-metoda model where you're, incentivizing people to refer other people. We went from like our first meeting, and it was all during Thanksgiving week, because we kept thinking things might, get a little better, but then we were so shut down. We weren't getting them, we weren't able to act on the model that we had envisioned when we wrote the grant. And so we just had to really, kind of scramble and come up with something that we thought was workable. And we actually did have, over 150 people sign up in 5 days, and we had over 100 people actually show up and participate in, in the whole activity. But we had multiple opportunities for these Zoom information meetings that were again led by a resident, and we also had them in different languages. So I think it worked pretty successfully. That was our model.
Great, thank you for sharing that.
The other thing is that, one of the things that really worked is going through the RNOs, we reached the people we wanted to reach. We really reached people that lived in Westridge. DHA was also a partner in terms of outreach as well, but the RNOs, we really reached people from those communities. And even when people were referring other people, they were referring people in their own community. And so we really, everybody that, participated were really from those communities. Sometimes I think, I don't know how this outreach was done. I talked about it a little bit with Mike. I didn't invite him, and I'm glad that, you all kind of came up with, some creative thinking around it. But, I think doing some of that promotion through the RNO does help.
Absolutely. We have a great, it's tiny but mighty communications team. So we'll definitely make sure that we will produce the material, share it with all of you, with the RNOs like we've done in the past, so that anything that y'all can do to help us get the word out is greatly appreciated. All right, well, I'm going to assume that there's a lively conversation going on in the chat, and that we get your ideas, and of course you can always send them to us afterwards. But I did want to just, I believe I've got just a couple more things here. About an hour or two ago, I got a flyer from DHA about our Decatur Fresh Market that is gone through its sort of soft opening, and now they're really ready to go. So I wanted to make sure to share it with this group in case you weren't already aware. But Tuesday, November 30th from 2:30 to 4:30, I think we're having an official drop in, check things out, come and see the new food provider in your area. So this is a really huge accomplishment for Sun Valley, for DHA, and really for the area. And I know that so many folks, probably every single person on this call, has been involved in this effort, and just really excited and so thrilled to support our partners at DHA in providing fresh and healthy food that is meaningful through the sort of cultural aspect to the community. So encourage you all, if you're not already aware of it, to go by and check them out, and to give them that love and support. And then I sent this out earlier this afternoon, but wanted just to make sure, particularly for those of you in the West Colfax neighborhood, that there is this event coming up on December 2nd. This is a separate project from ours. However, we've been working with this team, and our consultants that we've been working with through the West process are also involved in this. So there's good synergy and overlap to make sure that the work that is being done through Dottie and through this effort, is supported by and reflected in the West Area Plan and vice versa. And so I don't know, Zach, if you're still out there or if you are associated with this project or if there's anything you'd like to add, but if so, please chime in. But we definitely wanted to make sure that you all were aware of this opportunity to come in and just continue to follow this process and to participate. And Naomi, if you're there too, if there's anything you'd like to add, you or Council District 3.
Not at this time, but thanks so much, Eugene.
Thank you. And I think that is it. So actually, I did take this photo, or I didn't take it. I borrowed this photo from Valerie, but I did want to put it in the presentation. This is from last night. And I wanted just to take a moment, because I do believe this will be our last steering committee meeting for the year. And we just, as you all hear me, hopefully you hear me say this, we cannot do this work without you. I get a little emotional because I care so much about this community and the work that we do on your behalf. And I'm just so incredibly grateful because each of you show up month after month after month, and you've been doing it for 2 years to guide this process. And we hope we are doing you justice by the content in the sample that we sent to you and the fuller plan draft that you'll see here in a few weeks. But just wanted to thank you and acknowledge you and show our appreciation for you. So I don't know if other members of the team want to come off and just sort of thank everyone and give a big wave. But enjoy your holiday season, however you celebrate, if you celebrate. Enjoy this time with friends and family, or just take a break away from us. And we just thank you. So, all right. So thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday season. Look out check your email. We'll be sending some messages here and there. But just really, really love that you all are here. Thank you, Danny, for coming to participate and share information with us, and just all of our partners. Mo, it's great to see you. I miss seeing you in our other capacity. So I'll stop blabbing. Enjoy your night. Go watch football if that's your thing. Otherwise, we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
No holiday.
Thank you.